Ujai, and welcome to the Gator Gates podcast. We're back here with another episode. My name is Tutibsaa and Kagzrimen, and I'm here with my co-host,
Kebtah inside Kebtah.
And we have our guest in the building with us tonight. His name is
Zawaaz Heqwabti.
So before we get started, we'd like to acknowledge the ancestors are standing behind this work. My ancestors, his ancestors, your ancestors, all of our ancestors, and all of the forces in the non-material, all of the powers of nature, everything standing behind us and standing behind this great work, and standing behind all of us that allow us to be able to do this great work. And a quick word from our sponsors before we jump right in. Sauce Hot Sauce. Sauce Hot Sauce began in 2007 when a small group of students traveling in West Africa were trying to think of ways to support charitable projects. My mic just turned up really loud. We're trying to think of ways to support charitable projects. One of the students traveling happened to be an artisanal hot sauce chef, and right there, Sauce Hot Sauce was born. Since then, Sauce Hot Sauce has prided itself on making exceptional artisan hot sauces with high-quality ingredients to support good causes. We continue to do this with the best and the tastiest offering of sauce flavors to date, with a focus on supporting displaced families in the Fada and Gurma region of Burkina Faso with the revenue from our sales. So, last week we were talking about Christianity and we were talking about abortion, right? And this week we wanted to continue the topic on Christianity, but particularly we wanted to talk about the Christianity on the continent that we know of as Africa, or what is known as the continent of Merita, okay? So our guest today is a brother that hails from Ethiopia. He is an initiate, and he has a history in the Christian church of Merita, particularly
The Ethiopian Orthodox Church, correct?
Uh-huh.
Correct.
Particularly, he has a storied history, you could say, with it, where he was not only looking to rise to the higher ranks of the Ethiopian Christian church, he was very much involved in it before he kicked the bullshit and, got back with his ancestors. So,
No, but wait, before we say anything, I know this is going to get a lot of people mad, especially some of the, skin folk who particularly don't want to let go of this religion. They always say when you try to combat them with this, well, Christianity was in Africa a long time ago. Christianity was in Africa for 2,000 years. Christianity started after this, started after that. And now we have somebody who's actually from the area in which they claim it started. But let's unpack that a little bit, right?
Yeah, for sure.
well, before we get started, we're gonna hop right into rapid fire, and then we'll get to our main topic for tonight. So, our producer, if you don't mind.
All right, this is Tutibsaa and Heqwabti. It's time for rapid fire. 90 seconds per headline. We're going to be going through some current events, some things internationally and nationally that might spark your interest. So, you might have heard about what happened with Grizzlies NBA star Ja Morant recently. For the second time, he got caught on Instagram Live with the gun, with his friends, rapping with the gun in the video. The first time he got suspended for 10 games, there was an outcry because of gangster activity, and he did it again soon after. Any thoughts on the situation? People are very confused as to why he would do this at this time.
I mean, what's that saying? You can't fix stupid. Bro, at a certain point, he's got to realize, he has. If I was making millions of dollars playing in the NBA, and all I had to do was not go on Instagram Live with a gun, I wouldn't do it. I just don't understand what's wrong with this guy.
Well, I don't know. I don't know who raised him. I mean, everybody has we all come from our own walks of life, I mean, what's that saying? You can take somebody out the ghetto. You can't take the ghetto out somebody. I mean, I don't know.
I mean, if I could add to that, fame has an interesting way in which it affects people. So growing up, I've heard the saying, fame and shame are connected. But we do live in a country where there's lack of culture, and also, the concept of shame doesn't exist. So once you gain a certain status, a certain influence, then it kind of makes you feel a little invincible.
Ain't no shame in my game.
So yeah.
If I was playing in the NBA making millions of dollars, I'd be out there. I'd be supporting Christian causes. I would be supporting Jewish causes. I'd be supporting Muslim causes. I'd be supporting whatever needs to be supported. And then on the back end, I'd be doing what I'm really doing.
Mm.
But
Simple
again,
enough.
that's just the culture. So it is what it is.
But yeah, John Morant, get your life together, bro.
Let's
Get
chalk
it
up the
together.
culture.
Yeah.
So, next headline. We have going to England. King Charles is now inducted, and he has a crown that has these pretty profound diamonds on them that came from Africa in 1905,
Yeah.
and they're called the Cullinan diamonds. And basically, they're asking for him to return the diamonds back to Africa as a part of the reparations that people are seeking from King Charles at this time. And the issue now is that they're saying that these diamonds weren't stolen as war crimes; they were actually given during war, so they don't want to give them back. So this is like a longer, series of people trying to demand reparations from England at this time.
Who gives something during war?
who gave it?
What?
Apparently, this man named Louis Botha, Prime Minister of Transvaal or the Boer Republic, in 1905.
Is that another Englishman or is it another coon?
Where is he from?
Says Transvaal,
Transvo?
the Boer Republic. Yeah,
Where's that?
I can't give too much context, but this is.
So we don't know if this was an African guy who
he
just
wasn't African.
took
He was
on.
not- He was not an African.
Okay, so we have somebody who stole something and is trying to justify it to another person who he gave it to, or they're trying to justify it to the world, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't think we're ever gonna get those things back.
No, I mean it. It has to come back. I mean, they need to give that stuff back. What's his name? King Charles. I doubt you're gonna see this video, but if you do see this video, you need to give it back, and you need to give it back now, because I mean, you need to stop lying to us and stop lying to everybody else, because you know damn well they didn't give it to you. You took them.
Listen, man, the reparations thing, like I said, it's kind of
never
a
made sense to
falsehood.
me.
It doesn't make sense because the reparations it's for repairing a nation. That's the definition of it. So these nations didn't even exist. So whatever people are asking for, it's kind of like a moot point. Because how many years have we been asking for this thing? I mean, for me, I think people just need to start looking at a different way and another way, or maybe a way in which we can just reclaim our own dignity first before we go back and asking for things that were stolen. Because a thief ain't going to give something he stole. It is what it is.
All right. Moving forward, Elon Musk, Neuralink. I'm not sure if you heard about Neuralink. Technology that's going to basically be what's called a BCI, a brain-computer interface that's being developed. Well,
Matrix. The Matrix.
The Matrix, exactly. The precursor to the Matrix. Well, there's there's competition. Apparently, it's a company called Paradromics that's now getting some footing from the FDA. They're being seen. They're being given an expedited review process to get their technology put into medical devices, and it's going to help with mood enhancement, mental illness, chronic pain, and sensory deficits. And so this is getting they're getting a lot of traction right now to be able to begin to put this in actual devices. And they're saying that this market is worth $240 billion. So there's going to be a lot of money being invested into this space now. Any thoughts?
Yeah, if I may add to that, actually, if people
This
have
is
not-
our resident AI guy too. Go ahead.
if people have not already gotten a chance to be exposed to Agenda 2030, that's something to look into. It will give you a wide spectrum of what are the current plans that are in motion before the year 2030, because there is a real global agenda that's taking place with the real global leaders. Those aren't the people that you're going to be hearing about in terms of like the presidents and all of the quote unquote leaders that you see on television, but it's really the ones that are actually running the show, which is through finance, banking, all of that stuff. So one of the things that I would recommend for people to look into is look into the World Economic Forum. There is a constant meeting that's taking place, and decisions that are actually affecting people's lives currently. It gives you a bit more insight on what these technologies are really doing. And one of the biggest things that they're talking about, or the topic of discussion since 2014 or even earlier, has been the fourth industrial revolution, which really is looking to integrate biology and technology. And we're moving into an era where we're moving into a technocratic system where it's taking the technology and fusing it into the biology itself. This way they can monitor every aspect of your life.
So it's interesting because I was thinking about AI recently, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the way that they have AI set up, it's kind of like a genie. Like to the uninitiated, like a genie is like what gives you the ability to create. Like if you're an artist or, like an inventor, you name it, a genie is what would give you the ability to do so. So AI is just a genie. It's just a mechanical reverse engineered genie.
It's interesting because Zawaaz had actually made me watch this video of this guy when they were talking about this quantum computing and AI and stuff. And he called it, like, he said it was like sitting in front of the altar of an alien god, which was very, I don't know, that sounds alarming.
Chat GBT?
No. Quantum
What?
computers.
Quantum?
Yeah.
It's what even
What is
allows
that?
something like Chat
AI?
GPT to exist.
Precisely what he just said.
Right. It's just
it's
like
really quantum computing that even allows artificial
All right,
intelligence.
they're cutting us off. They're cutting us off.
For
Go.
the sake of time, I feel like this would be a good topic for a full episode in the future.
Okay.
But
Yeah, for sure.
yeah,
There's
because
a
we
lot
can
to
spend all
unpack in
night
it.
talking about
Yeah,
that.
we could
There's a lot
spend
to
all
go into
night talking about
that one for sure.
But if I may say, there is a war being waged on your mind, so definitely inform yourself.
Definitely.
I drop a bomb, but I don't remember which one is my bomb. Go ahead.
So, next headline. Apparently, there's a new dinosaur that's been discovered. A species of Spinosaurid. A Spinosaurid. It was
Where'd you guys get that one from?
Hey, the internet is vast.
It's current events, man.
It was discovered in Spain. Apparently, the fossils go back over 127 million years. And the name is the Protodolitis. These names are always quite unique in Greek. And it means champion in Greek.
Okay. Is it like, how big is it? Is it like a T-Rex size
Wait,
thing?
let me just say this. Dinosaurs aren't real. Okay,
gosh.
like it's not real. They
Oh,
made it
gosh.
up. It's not real, and it's a way to distract you from real human history.
Why are you trying to destroy every childhood
my
dream?
dreams.
Because, bro, the same way they never went to the moon either. Like they're lying to you. Everything is a lie.
Wait, that's a big statement right there. We got to actually talk about that if we're gonna say that.
That's definitely something.
But that's a whole topic
That's
we
a
can get
topic
into.
for another
That's a
conversation.
whole
We'll do a whole
topic.
episode on that one. But yeah, that's not real. They didn't go to the moon. Dinosaurs aren't real, and there's so many other things they're lying to you about. But does anybody else have anything to say about the Spinosaurus?
Well, I mean, listen, there's not much to say on that.
I mean, I think honestly, a lot of the current events these days are very interesting to look at because, like he just said, it's just something to distract you from the real events that are taking place. So it's almost like a Trojan horse to introduce something else.
You know, some of the images of the moon that they put out, I kid you not, when we were in California, I went and I climbed up top like the hill by the mountain, and I'm looking at it, and I looked at the images. It's like one image is like this plain blank red space. You could tell it's Photoshop. And the next image was like a clear blue sky. But they had showed people all the images of like the red sky so much. By the time you reach the image with the plain blue sky, people don't register it. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, they friggin' took a picture of this where I'm standing right now and put it on the internet.
Yeah.
I kid you not.
Crazy. So, let's get into this
They're
next
on
topic.
us today.
Right?
They're making sure we stay with a crisp 90 seconds. Go ahead.
Let's keep it clean. So, next topic. Utah mom apparently poisoned her husband with fentanyl in a cocktail. And in that process, she took out over $2 million of life insurance policies and then wrote a book, a children's book, about her grief
Wow.
following that incident and made more money.
I wish I was her life insurance agent.
Like,
That's a big payout.
so I looked
Whoever
into
is her agent is banking right now.
I looked into this, right? And man, women. Like, that is crazy because like I read into this, like 3 or 4 days after her husband died, she then called the locksmith to come drill into his safe. And then his sister, because he knew she was trying to poison him, right? And so
The sister.
No,
I
the
know, the
husband
husband.
knew his wife was trying to poison him, but stayed for the kids. First and foremost, R.I.P. But you're stupid for that one, right? Because it would. The minute I know you're trying to kill me, it's over. Like,
It's you first.
whoa.
You going first.
but anyway, so when the sister found out, because he started putting everything in the sister's name in a trust, right? Because he knew what the wife was trying to do.
Smart guy.
And then apparently when the wife, after she killed the husband, she then had a locksmith come and drill into the safe, and she was trying to take the money out the safe, and the sister confronted her like, "Nah, don't do that." And then the wife beat up the sister. Like, she punched her and was like, "Nah, like, I'm taking it." So be careful who you trust. Don't trust even the lady that you lay down next to at night.
There you have it. So
Wow.
No comments.
Wow.
on a lighter but not really note, we have Elon Musk make several tweets about George Soros. He's a billionaire investor. Yeah, that guy. He's a billionaire investor who has heavily invested in the election of progressive officials, different progressive campaigns, Black Lives Matter, and other movements over the years. And Musk had this to say about George Soros. Soros reminds me of Magneto from from X-Men. He also says, yeah.
That's what Elon Musk said?
Yeah. Soros hates humanity and wants to erode the very fabric of civilization.
Magneto.
So people are pretty upset about this, but you know,
That's a pretty accurate
but
description.
yeah. What do you think?
Wait, but hold on. Y'all know
interesting.
y'all know that the X-Men are based off of like Charles Xavier and Magneto are based off of Martin Luther King and Malcolm X.
Yeah.
I heard about that before,
So
actually.
you're telling me that white people were like, let's make a comic book based off of black people, but then let's make them white, and that's why Charles Xavier is called Charles Xavier with the X, right? Because it's Malcolm X, and then Martin Luther King is based off of Charles Xavier is based off of Malcolm X's philosophy, and Malcolm X is based off of Magneto is based off of Malcolm X's philosophy.
But they changed the name, so they gave who
no, they
Martin
were
Luther
like,
King is like the X.
yeah, but they were like, but let's make them white.
Yeah.
Because and then let's make it about mutants, and let's take away the black experience, and then just make it about white people.
You know they use African deities to give the X-Men their powers.
Oh, they did?
Yeah.
Shout out to Storm. But yeah, I mean, sorry, we went off on a tangent right there. But yeah, Elon Musk, I don't know. I don't really know a lot about George Soros, but like, hey, I know that he, funds whatever things he can funds because of the money that he has, and he funds, whatever he can. So I'm not surprised.
Just goes to show you, once you have money, you can do
Whatever you want. You could do whatever you want.
lot.
Yeah.
This guy funded an entire fake movement or a fake migration of people on live TV.
You're not in the frame, bro.
Can you believe that?
You gotta stay in the frame. Y'all gotta stop sitting back.
Gotcha.
Y'all gotta stay in the frame. All right.
Before we go into the next headline, make sure to go ahead, if you're watching on YouTube, to scan the QR code to check out our website to gain access to more articles, more information, and our merchandise. So, next topic, we have going back to Africa, America as we know it. So they're saying essentially that Africa needs its own central medical system, so that for like the next pandemics or for future vaccinations, they're able to produce their own vaccines on their own land. Because African nations consume about 25% of vaccines produced globally, but import 99% of their supply. So they want Africans to vaccinate Africans, essentially.
So now they want house niggas to oversee the field niggas. So they want it to be a self-contained system now, where they have the. I mean, the modern medical system need. Don't get me started on the modern medical. Do not get me started on the modern medical system, because we're gonna do a series on the modern medical system within the next few weeks, and we're really gonna go in on them, because I have a bone to pick. I have a personal bone to pick with the modern medical system for a lot of different reasons. So get ready. But yeah, nonetheless, they just need to just leave us alone, bro. Like, just stay out of it. Like, don't try and push your BS on us. Like, just stay away. Like, we don't need your medicines. We have our own healers. We have our own systems that have been around for longer than you decided to wake up and claim to be able to help people, or to use your modern medical system for what you claim you can use it for, and your barbaric ways and all of your bullshit. Like, just stay away. Stay away.
And fact of the matter is, all of your medicines that you claim to be so great, all of your pills and your fancy bottles, you know you went into our villages and stole all that information, took herbs and made synthetic versions of those things, and is now selling it, and is selling it back to us for profit. Get out of here with that. But on that note, shout out to Madagascar, because when COVID was happening, Madagascar was one of 2 countries in Africa who actually decided that they were going to use indigenous medicine to get rid of COVID. And they actually not only used the indigenous medicine, they bottled and produced this medicine, and then came on the world stage and then said, we can do it on our own. We have our own indigenous medicine. We have our ancestors, and we have our things that we know that actually work and are actually good for us. We don't need no vaccines. So shout out to Madagascar.
It's really unfortunate what happened to the Tanzanian president after he made that move in terms of sending in those fake COVID results. I think, what was it?
Oh yeah, they sent out. I remember that they sent out like the. They did the test on like a goat.
Yeah,
and they did the test.
fruit.
It might have been like Rwanda. Was it Tanzania?
No,
it was Tanzania. It was definitely Tanzania, because they killed the president after that.
Nah, Rwanda is part of the whole.
Rwanda's down with the program.
Rwanda's
With
down
the
with the
agenda?
program, fully down.
Oh wait. Go ahead. Good.
Let's keep it going forward. So
They're keeping us tight.
let's go. So next topic. This one is not interesting. So there's an outcry as Australian police taser a 95-year-old woman. Yeah, I know. Apparently she was outside.
I'm sorry for laughing.
Damn, Granny, what you did?
You know, life is crazy. Things happen. You know, she was outside of her care facility with a knife. And so people.
She was outside. She was outside of the old folks' home with a knife.
Yeah.
So they
Apparently,
tased her.
They said she was walking very slow, but it was still a threat. So they tased her. Unfortunately, she fell and suffered like an actual skull damage and brain.
Whoa.
Yeah, skull
serious.
damage.
It's terrible.
But people are outraged. People are like, how dare you tase this woman? What would you have done in that?
She's
situation?
She's 95.
95.
Bro, you could literally get close to her and then back up, and she still can't get you. Like, she's 95.
Damn.
Was she like, oh, I'm gonna cut you? Like, by the time you see the knife coming down, you can dodge it. Damn.
That's ridiculous.
Shout out to the Australian police. You're really abusing your power there.
Yeah,
Like-
it just goes to show that there's no culture in these places and no respect for our elders, because that's just.
I mean, it's sad, but
sad.
it's also hilarious that they felt the need to tase a 95-year-old lady.
Right.
Like, you can't handle a 95-year-old lady. That would have been. Wait, was she white or black? Does it say? She was white. Yeah, if she was white, then yeah, obviously they tased her. Because if she was black, she would have been like,
at this point.
would have been like, drop the knife. It wouldn't have been a tasing situation.
But in light
They
of
would have
what
shot a
we were even-
95-year-old lady in cold blood.
But in light of what we were talking about earlier, in terms of even the fourth industrial revolution, I think, Australia is one of the first countries to actually implement a lot of those changes. And I think one of the things they're talking about now is like the 15-minute city, where like this new technocratic system that's going to be employed is only going to allow you to be within the vicinity of a 15-minute radius. That means your work. That means your commute to the grocery store. Anything that you do is going to be accessible within a 15-minute radius, which is very interesting. but something to look into.
All right.
They're keeping us tight tonight.
So, next topic. Everyone's favorite fast food chain, Wendy's, is now introducing robots into their infrastructure.
Oh, so it's like Japan.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, okay.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm not surprised.
What are they doing in Japan?
Oh, you didn't know about that? If you go to Japan, son, like they have robots like as waiters. Like they don't have regular waiters anymore. They have robots. They even have like restaurants where you just order and there's like a conveyor belt that like pushes the food around in like a circle and it goes around all the tables.
It's like a sushi bar.
Not just sushi, it's everything. Whatever food that you want. It just kind of like there's like a bowl. There's bowls of food and you just grab them off the conveyor belt and you just sit down and you eat it. And it comes to your table.
We actually got one of those down here.
Yeah,
A
yeah.
few blocks down.
Yeah, a few blocks
there's
down.
a sushi spot, right?
It's a sushi and a ramen spot. They have the robots. The robots
they
come
do.
Oh, I need to
and
go
they bring
there.
you
What's it called?
the food. I don't remember the name, but it's there. It's popular.
I think rolling sushi or something
You gotta,
like that.
you gotta tell me.
But more context, though. Basically, what's going to happen is like when people come to pick up orders, like deliveries, the robot will go from the kitchen to the parking lot, and it's like this underground system, and then give the food.
So it like pops up at the ground like a
Kind of
whack-a-mole.
like that. Something of that nature. Yeah. And so this is one step towards integrating more AI into these industries.
Industrial
it's happening.
Revolution.
Yeah, we have a
Fourth Industrial Revolution.
we have a topic
Industrial
on the Industrial Revolution coming up soon. So you got to tune in for that too, for us to really go in on that. Because I mean, first and foremost, you only go eat fast food if you don't have like any other options. Like if it's like 2 a.m. and like you can't go certain places, or you're on the road, you're in the middle of nowhere, and you have to go eat fast food.
I don't know, since some people just actually like fast food.
Because it's filled with sugar.
Yeah, but this is America.
It's true.
You know?
Yeah, I mean it's filled
It's a
with
country
sugar.
that runs on fast food.
Yeah. What's next?
All right, so going to Singapore. So Singapore has hung two men in 3 weeks for trafficking cannabis.
Oh, they get down like that still?
Yeah,
They do hangings?
This is not
Shout out
America.
to Singapore.
Yo,
Yeah.
oh.
This is not America.
Hey, I can't knock the rigidity.
You know,
So they hung them for what? For
They were
weed?
trafficking cannabis into the country.
yo,
And
that's
so they're
that's
definitely
strict.
cracking
That's
down.
strict as hell up in Singapore.
That's ridiculous.
But I heard though, Singapore is one of the safest places to live in the world.
and one of the cleanest.
Yeah.
It's one of the their cities are clean.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
like
yeah,
if you
if they're
throw
hanging
gum on
you,
the floor, like
that's the threat.
they come at you.
But I think that's also shows the culture though, because Asian cultures are very, 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 very strict
And very much respectful.
in traditions. So I think they just really took that and just kind of like went full force with it. I mean, that's crazy. A little bit of weed. It's an herb, bro. Like damn.
Deeper into this article, they're saying that the guy who was hung, 46 years old, he was caught with 1 kilogram, so 2.2 pounds of cannabis, and apparently he didn't even have it on him. They were able to track phone numbers and coordinations of delivery.
Listen, all my fellow Jamaicans, Caribbean people, don't go to Singapore. Don't do it. Don't do it.
Don't
do it.
I mean, you can go to Singapore, but just respect their rules and respect what they have, because they will hang you. All right, what's next?
All right, so
I ain't mad at it.
we have Canadian indigenous Christians. They're basically
That's an oxymoron, but okay,
it's
keep
quite
going.
confusing.
That's exactly what I said.
And they're asking for the need for religious freedom, and they feel like as indigenous Christians that they're
You can't be indigenous and be a Christian,
But that's what they're saying.
because
That's-
Christianity is a tool of
that's-
colonialism.
that's their
We'll get
niche.
into that soon.
That's their niche. They're saying as indigenous Christians, they're not. They feel like they're being humiliated. They're not given respect, and so forth. But there's definitely an oxymoron in this situation.
That's this is like I think the Ottawa people.
That's the name of the tribe.
Let me double check.
So this is like I think Bill Burr was talking about how like white women had jacked like the woke movement, like how they were totally okay with like everything that white men were doing in terms of colonialism for like thousands of years, until it became like that white men were the target, and then they were like, no, like we're not down. we're not down with colonialism. This is another example of just like people hijacking colonialism or hijacking like a social justice movement to some extent, where it's like you have people that like have no business inserting themselves into colonialism and trying to like distance themselves from colonialism. Like you can't be a Christian and then claim to be a victim of colonialism unless you don't come from the Christian doctrine already. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna curse, but you know,
I mean, I heard of
other
approaches that some indigenous people from the Amazonian tribes sort of taking that approach, where they're bringing in ayahuasca as a form of
religious protection.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They're calling.
I mean,
it
that's
like
the way they gotta
Eucharist.
put it. That's the way they gotta put it for people in the system to respect it.
Exactly. That way they move around and they're still able to, preserve their indigenous practices and really, enforce it, because ayahuasca is becoming something really big in this country.
So
now,
maybe it's just the cold in Canada that's got their brains rattled, because this doesn't make any sense. And it's things like this that really, grinds my gears, because I can't, me personally, in understanding my indigenous roots, understanding like the history of colonialism and slavery, it really, really, really irks me when I see people who are also, I don't want to say victim, but we are victims of it, right? Victims of colonialism, champion colonialism in that way, because you're trying to have freedom to be a Christian, but your freedom to be who you are was taken away by those practicing Christianity. It just doesn't make sense. And I can't, it just grinds my gears, man.
And one point to make, and this is a perfect segue into the topic today anyways. But
Is that it? We done with rapid fire?
This is the last headline. Okay. They were saying that Christianity wasn't imposed on them. This is the Cree Metis, Cree Metis people.
The what?
The Cree Metis.
Cree Metis?
Yeah, that's the name of the people apparently. They were saying that it wasn't imposed on them, that they freely chose Jesus as their savior.
So it sounds like they was some of the groups of Native Americans that sold out other Native Americans. Because for people who don't know, there's a lot of Native Americans who actually sold other Native Americans into slavery. And then those same Native Americans sold other black people into slavery as well. Or they were part of the slave trade. And they sold other people, and they also sold fur for wealth.
Wait, so
like it you know what I'm saying? It's like you sold your people.
Did you learn this
fur.
from your Native American guy on St. Mark's?
You talking about on the guy on 14th Street? Come on, man. Come on. But I'm sure if he was here,
thought I forgot?
I'm sure if he was here, he'd agree with me on this, though.
I just
definitely agree.
I got a Native American connect. That nigga's on 4th Street, on St. Mark's. He's a real Indian. But before we hop into the topic, I know somebody was asking about the classes on Saturdays. So the classes that we offer within the initiation, we offer 3 classes. We have Medu, which is a class where you learn how to read, write, and speak the first human indigenous language, which came from the divine world, which is Medu, and it also has a philosophy aspect. So there's a lecture portion, not only a technical portion, and then you also have the Katibi class, which translates to the best way to put it is maybe meditation, where you learn how to do the original indigenous human form of meditation with its original goal, which came from the divine world, which we learned from the divine world and the world of the gods. And it's been preserved in secret for thousands of years. And there's also a philosophical aspect of it as well. Not only do you learn technical poses, you learn how to connect with your ancestors, how to feed your ancestors, how to do offerings for your ancestors when it's favorable, in terms of the calendar, in terms of the cosmic gate that opens up for you to reach the world of the divine and the world of the world of the dead, or the world of the ancestors. And then we also have a 3rd class, which is Sunt, which is a healing class where you learn about the indigenous way of healing. You learn how to assess the body. There's also a technical portion. There's also a lecture portion. So, you can come check us out. We have one class on Saturday. We have 2 classes on Sunday. You guys are more than welcome to come check us out. 1506 Anderson Avenue, Fort Lee, New Jersey. But we have multiple locations all throughout the country. You can also check out our online initiation. You could check out our 2 locations in Canada. We have 1 location in Montreal. We have 1 location in Toronto. We have 2 locations in the UK. We have 1 in London. We have 1 in Coventry. We have 1 location in terms of North America. We also have, or Manu in terms of America. We have 1 in New Jersey. We have 1 in Baltimore. We have 1 in Houston. We have 1 in Chicago. We're also working to bring you a location in California, which allows me to segue to all of the events that we have currently. You could check out dogonwisdom.com to check out all of the events that we're doing on the West Coast right now. We have a team out there that is doing a bunch of events out there on the West Coast right now. We have events that are going on in Northern California, Southern California. We have events that are going to be in Colorado as well. We have events that are going to be in Texas. So check us out, dogonwisdom.com, and please, support, like, subscribe. Check us out on all of the resources that we have online that you can check out. So let's hop into our topic. So, like we were saying, and then we stopped him from, really going in on it before we did the rapid fire segment. So Zawaaz, tell us a little bit about the Ethiopian church.
Well,
Dun, dun, dun.
what was the original question?
Yeah,
Let Kagzrimen.
Yeah, Kagzrimen, you can give him a little bit of an alley-oop.
Yeah, I know. I mean, seeing as this is probably a very big topic, and I know it's also a sensitive topic for you, I want to hear more about your experience in the church. Like, what was things that you noticed in the church that made you think to yourself, hey, I don't know if this is correct. I don't know if this is something that I actually see myself in, because Ethiopians are very, very proud people. And I know, talking to a lot of Ethiopians and even Jamaicans, because Jamaicans have this very strong connection to Ethiopia, they have this sentiment where anything coming from Ethiopia or anything dealing with Christianity is like the absolute truth. And it's like the foundation of the society itself. So what were the things you noticed that made you question that, coming from a background so strongly or heavily rooted in that?
I mean, personally, I was born in Ethiopia, so everything that I was exposed to since childhood was that, I grew up in a very heavy Christian family, both on my mother's side and father's side. It wasn't really until I started, traveling with my father, due to certain political instabilities that were occurring in the country, that, we sought asylum as a refugee, traveled from different places to get to,
And why were you guys seeking refuge? What was going on geographically in that area?
Geographically, there was always political issues, primarily between Ethiopia and Eritrea, which has been waging since before I was born. You know what I mean?
Which doesn't make sense.
Which doesn't, because it's
Same
the same
people,
people,
right?
same people, same
Colonial,
culture.
but it's more like the colonial people coming in and saying, like, everybody on this side is going to be this, everybody on that side is going to be that, and then now fight.
Pretty much, it's politics.
Like Haitians and Dominicans?
You could say that, yes.
Don't say that to any Haitians.
Me no black, papi. Me no black. Me no black. Me no black.
Don't say that to
me no
any
black.
Haitians.
Me no black.
But yeah, it's something interesting, because my mother's actually Eritrean and my father's Ethiopian.
Oh,
So just even growing up
some
as a
Romeo and
mixed-
Juliet love story, huh? Like,
So growing up as a mixed child,
Taboo.
I've seen that
Mixed.
tribal issue that's even started just with that, where my parents really couldn't settle together because there was a lot of family issues and so on and so forth. But then that's not really where, you see it stop. It's the whole country itself, where people feel like, oh, we're the original people, and then the other people are like, no, the original ones, this is the original culture, this is the original language, and it's the same language, it's the same thing. Although I would say that I think the Eritrean language is a bit older because it's much closer to what they're considering to be like the language of the gods, which is or the angels. Excuse me. Let me correct that. Language of the angels, which is known as Giz. So that's even what in the Christian Orthodox Church, that's actually what's used in terms of like the praise and the ceremonies, all of that stuff. That's the language that's actually used. So when you're hearing that language and the breakdown of it, it sounds very closely related to Eritrean language, which is like Tigrinya.
Yeah, so I don't want to cut you off, but
Yeah.
what does this have to do with Christianity?
But that's where I'm trying to get at.
Okay.
So, growing up, that's just been my exposure,
Yeah.
So I didn't know anything outside of that, and we're heavily educated in that this is the foundation of how our reality is shaped, is through that culture, that religion, which actually has found its way into the culture. So it's a very interesting fusion between the religion itself and the culture that's like merged. So growing up, like, you build that identity. So anything else that you see outside, or somebody else bringing a different kind of religion, like let's say Islam, or let's say Judaism or whatever, you have a very strong mentality in that, which you don't question what you're from, because even the way that you're educated is that if you turn your back on your religion, you're pretty much condemned for the rest of eternity. Like,
That's
you lose
interesting.
eternity.
That's the way they do it
That's
in
very
Africa
interesting.
in general.
Yeah.
And they do that in the Caribbean too.
Yeah.
Like they very much, because it's kind of like it's important to give the context that these things aren't coming from us, they're coming from outsiders, right?
But we don't know that. Growing up, we don't know that.
Growing up, we don't know that, but we're lucky enough to come or to have exposure into a historical context that gives you that history, that it's not coming from you and it's coming from the outside, and then it's coming from people that have co-opted things from your ancestral culture to closely resemble what you are already doing within your ancestral culture, so that you wouldn't, feel too, you wouldn't feel that bad about distancing yourself from your ancestral culture, because it closely resembles what was coming from your ancestral culture in terms of the colonial tool that they were presenting to you, which is religion.
Hence why I was saying that, the traditions have been so tightly infused into the religion itself that it's very difficult to separate it. You don't really have a way of really like seeing it as anything different. You sort of claim it as your own because it has that flavor of your own culture and tradition infused into it. So it makes it very difficult to identify, or even when something is exposed to you externally, that is bringing, let's say, like actual African culture, you sort of tend to have a resistance to it. Also because I would say that the religion itself sort of highlights Ethiopia as like the pedestal.
You mean Christianity?
Christianity, exactly, yeah.
How come?
Because, there's a lot of historical documentation in the Bible where it references Ethiopia as being the chosen land.
Why?
I mean, they wrote it, so it's gonna say that.
Why though?
It's very funny. I think growing up, I've never really questioned that. But it's almost like you grow up hearing that and you build a sense of like specialness to your own identity.
So you guys are like the Jews of Africa?
Yeah, well, you can say we're the first Jews.
The chosen people?
Yeah, we're the first Jews.
Yeah. Like y'all can't mess with us because we're the chosen ones. Everybody else is cursed, right?
I mean, essentially the religion has a way of, coining that perspective. Because if you're not really, because the thing about Christianity, and not like any Christianity, we're talking about Orthodox Christianity. It's by the book. It's very rigid.
What do you mean
Real-
by the book and rigid?
Real quick, I just want to highlight what you're saying, because I think in America, people have a perspective on Christianity that is really false. Because the perspective on Christianity that people have is the perspective of the Englishman. So most people, when they say they're Christians here in America, especially in the black community, they don't understand that they're Protestants, right?
Exactly.
And Protestant is really an organization or a movement, so to say, that really stemmed from a rebellion against the Roman Catholic Church,
Exactly.
which is more like the traditional version of Christianity, right? Which is what
Well,
they call
say-
Catholicism, right?
They say, but that's even a break off from Orthodox Christianity.
Right.
There you go.
So we just have to make that very clear, because some people might not know or understand that small little detail.
Because even now you have like Baptist, all these different forms of Christianities that exist here that we don't really have back home. I've never heard of that until I actually traveled here. And I remember
What, you mean the different denominations of Christianity?
Exactly.
So you're saying that the different denominations of Christianity doesn't exist in
Protestants
Ethiopia?
does. Catholicism does.
Catholicism, Protestantism does.
Right.
Uh-huh.
But
Greek
even,
Orthodox.
Yeah. But even those things are frowned upon, even through the...
So then what kind of Christianity are they practicing in Ethiopia? What's the original one?
What they're considering to be the original one is the Orthodox Church itself.
And so how does it differ?
It differs in that it has not changed anything
So then
from
what is
the
it?
original text itself. Like we're talking about the Torah. I always have
The Torah?
The Torah.
Talking about the Jewish holy book?
Exactly. But we do have other segments of the Bible that has not been removed, that in many other parts of the world now, you actually have several scrolls that are missing.
So this is like some Indiana Jones shit. Like you got people out here looking for the those scrolls and all that kind of stuff.
I mean, to this day, there are people actually traveling to study those and actually translate those books. One of those books is the Book of Enoch, which actually really goes into a lot of the...
You got to stop hitting the table because it's
I got you.
it's
It
picked
goes-
up on. Yeah,
it goes
the mic is picking it up.
into the other side of what Christianity doesn't expose, which is
Like-
what comes after you die, which is
So
is
you're
also
saying that
dealing
Christianity-
with celestial bodies and all this other stuff. Exactly.
So now
Even
we're
going
getting
as
somewhere.
far as reincarnation and all those aspects.
So you're saying that Christianity has these aspects in it in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church,
It does.
but they remove it in the different denominations.
Yes.
So then it's interesting because then it begs the question, then where's Christianity getting that from?
That's the thing, like growing up for me, I had the opportunity to travel to many monasteries with my family. So I had the chance to really see.
So what was your goal? Were you trying to be were you like planning on doing the whole shebang? Like, were you going to cut off like the penis and the balls?
I mean, that's before I knew all that practice.
Well, you got to give context. You can't just say stuff like
I
that.
mean, He's kinda
you were
throwing it
gonna do it? You were gonna do it?
But this is let's slow down, bro, please, because there's a lot to cover before we get there.
Yeah, that's a heavy one, because most Christians are gonna be watching this like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Not my Bible.
Yeah.
Not my God.
But that's the thing, that's the thing
Okay.
a lot of people don't recognize is that
That you
A
don't
lot
have to
of it
cut
has
off your
been-
penis and your balls?
a lot of it has been changed over time. The book has been translated by many people, and there's a lot of scrolls that have been removed that quote unquote removes the original text and the original goal of Christianity itself. So for me growing up and actually participating in these monasteries and the practices and so on and so forth, you're exposed to more and more of these things. And as a child, you're curious, so you ask. You ask certain questions. And for me, I think the area where things really began to be shaky in my own perspective was when I was told I couldn't question certain things.
Like what? Like what were you asking? And then they were like, stop asking questions.
Well, to begin with, for me, I always had a fascination of where did I come from?
Mm-hmm.
Ever since I was a child, that's just a question I've always had, because I look around, everybody comes from somewhere, but I just
Well, what do you mean by that? Like
didn't
you mean
have a
like
reference
where's
that-
your original land, or like when daddy ejaculated in mommy,
Exactly.
like where did I come
How
from?
did I get
like how did I
through
get
my
there? Like
parents?
where did I appear
Exactly.
from? Okay. Uh-huh.
Because you hear about the stories of God, you hear about the stories of creation, wonderful stuff.
Mhm.
Your mind is just fascinated by, okay, what is this? This is what I have to look forward to, but it's like, but where do I come from?
Mhm.
So that question for me was initially what took me into really questioning things, like who created all of this? God. why did he create all of this? Who created God? And so on and so forth. But when you really start pushing the boundaries of certain things within that religion, you're instantly cut off. And you're told
Cut off how?
You're told that it's essentially a blasphemy for you to question certain things that has been laid out through the text itself.
Jesus
So meaning-
Christ.
So meaning like they just tell you like, don't ask questions. Like
Pretty
just
much.
accept it for what it is and just keep going.
So let me just give you a bit more context because it's
Yeah.
kind of vague. So the origin of the Bible story is that before anything was created, one of the first creations was Satan, but his name was Satnael as an angel.
Satnael.
Satnael.
Samael in some translations.
Satnael.
No, I'm saying in some translations outside of Ethiopia, it's Samael.
Mm.
That's why, like, if Sam's Club, like the Devil's Club, we're
That's
going. That's another. That's a whole other conversation. It's a whole other conversation.
Cancel your membership to Sam's Club.
But anyway, so that was a favored angel, almost like the right hand of God, right? So every form of creation came after that particular creation.
After
known as
Satan.
Satan.
Yeah.
Presently known as Satan, but before then was not known as Satan, but was known as Satnael. And that angel was one of the most beautiful, intelligent.
Wasn't he God's favorite?
Exactly.
Yeah.
He was like his right hand man,
Yeah.
to kind of keep it short.
Yeah.
But essentially, after all of the creations of the heavens were made, it said that in the story that God decided to conceal himself. There's no real explanation of why, but he just chose to conceal himself because Satnael was actually in charge of the praise or worship. That was the angel that was in charge of worship, which is why we have a lot of issues with music and the music industry and so on and so forth, and why it runs the world and so on and so forth.
Okay, you're getting somewhere.
So what's interesting about that is that when God decided to conceal himself,
Mm-hmm.
and this is obviously outside of time and space, as they sort of explain it to you, so, you know, the duration of that time period is not really known. Essentially, you know, Satan started getting those ideas where he was like, why don't I tell them that I'm God since I'm running the whole show?
So you're saying that God was like, all right, I'm taking a break. Like I'm leaving.
They've never specified that.
Yes, but
yes.
I'm making it more accessible, right?
I got you.
So like God was like, I'm good. Like I'm gonna go take a break. But while I'm taking a break, like you got it, you can cover me to Satnael. And then Satnael was like, you know what? Like I'm doing all the work. I'm doing everything. Why don't I just take the credit for everything? Why don't I just say
Essentially.
I'm the big dog?
Because the way it goes is that God, after creating all the things that he created that he saw was good, he appointed specific instructions. He appointed specific responsibilities upon all of the different angels. He just happened to be his favorite, and he just happened to be the one that received the authority and power.
So he was the
being in charge
the
of
eldest,
worship.
the
Correct.
eldest child.
Correct. Because the whole premise of religion, in terms of even Christian Orthodox religion, is about praising God. So that praise, now that I'm even older thinking about it, is associated with some form of an energy that you're feeding back into the creation itself. So that's something big, apparently. So from that point of view, you know, after some time, he looked around and he decided, why don't I tell them that I am God, since they don't know God? So since that moment, his fall or his demise began because God reappeared and he basically casted him down.
He's like, I'm back from break.
He stripped all of his, let's say, authority, but not his power.
So he
stripped
took
his
when you say
grace, that's what they call it,
they say they took his grace, but then they didn't take away
his power. Because what's interesting about that is that, you know, now it becomes a whole situation where now Satnael, who gets demoted to being Satan, is now saying to God, I have a vision for where the existence can go.
So
and is waging
Satnael
his
said,
ideology.
let me
run the show.
take it from here.
And basically God said that this is not how it goes.
Okay.
So they sort of began a wage within the existence between each other. And everything else now became about God decided after the fall of Satan, who then in that moment decided, the duration of time is not really told to us, but decided to go and take a lot of legions of angels with him, who he...
You said God or Satnael?
Satnael.
He was like, I'm leaving, who's coming with me?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And those that went with him were also casted down. So this is even...
Casted down to where,
to,
though?
down to here, to earth.
Down to earth. But it even says like hell and all of that stuff because they were bound into the earth.
So you're saying earth is hell?
They don't say that, but they say that beneath the earth is where hell is.
Really?
So essentially, like what they're considering to be magma, lava, all of that is the non-material aspect of it is
Hell.
what hell is. And that's just the byproduct of what you're seeing is coming out of that. Because those angels were bound. After they were casted down, they were bound into the earth itself.
So it sounds like
And there's
it's
even
an
a
analogy.
prophecy where at some point in
Metaphor, yeah.
time,
Yeah.
when the world, where that duration of time will end, the world will end, and they will be released.
The world's never going to
So,
end.
But
Let me
that's
just say
what
that.
But it's all metaphor. It's not literal, and I think that's where Christians get this whole thing like messed up
But
because
that's
they
the
take
thing,
things
though.
too literal.
the way that it's educated to you, it is literal.
Mm-hmm.
So you grow up believing that. You grow up, for me personally, I think the fear element of it was more present than the understanding and the seeking of really wanting to understand what God was really about.
Mm.
Because throughout the religion itself, there's plenty of times where that warning is like stated, that if you stray away, if you call on another God, you're done. There's no forgiveness for you.
So
So that essentially started the chain of questions for me. Like, how can there be a God that is all loving, right? Or the concept of love, which is like, thou shalt be patient, kind, always forgive, all of these other things. There's even a whole list of it in the Bible. How can a God that is like that at the same time can condemn you to eternity in hell? That was a question for me that just
God,
my mind
God sounds very human.
couldn't really fathom that, because I would essentially look at my parents and would think, is that how you would treat me if I fucked up?
So this is the thing, right? Is it sounds like the Ethiopian Orthodox Church took this story of Satnael and God and warped and removed certain parts from the kemetic creation story.
Essentially.
So they just took different parts, removed it, and then we're like, well, this is what it's going to be. We're going to insert this. And then they kind of changed the flavor on some aspects, added this part, added that part, and said, we're going to do this and we're going to do that, right?
Essentially, before you get there, let me give a bit more context that's going to highlight what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
So after that fall and after the angels were bound, God decided to create again. And that was us. That was Adam. Adam was actually essentially created after the earth was perfected, and so on and so forth, and all of the creations were brought. Adam was created, and I think everybody knows the Adam and Eve story. So
Before we get to Eve, though, I know if you're reading the Talmud or the Jewish text, right, which really come from the Ethiopian text originally, there's Lilith, right? Meaning like Eve is not even in a thought right now. He created Adam, but he also created Lilith together.
But that's even essentially something that's concealed from the public.
Why?
That's I think now I have a better understanding of it now than I did before, because of the exposure of initiation, because of the exposure of secrecy within the culture itself. They have that element intertwined. Like I said, the culture and the tradition is intertwined into the religion. So they have that. And essentially, if you don't get initiated past a certain point, you're not going to get exposed to certain knowledge.
So there's secrecy within the church. Like there's
Exactly.
hierarchy, there's levels, there's stages.
Most definitely.
Like the
Okay.
Freemasons.
I
Most
mean,
definitely.
if we're talking about Freemasonry, like the church, or especially the Orthodox churches, would be considered the first or original forms of Masonry, right?
Mhm.
Because that's where the whole secret societies and all these things started. Because I kind of want to go back to where you were mentioning the foundation. Now, listening to all the things that you're saying, the question that comes to my mind is, okay, if God gave the power to Satan or Samael, we're going to use Samael for people who are not familiar, right? Now, Samael now has the authority, but then God returns and then says, no, that's not how I want things to be run. So he casts Samael out. For me, in my understanding, in my own researches, this sounds like a story that's like a metaphor or an analogy for another event, current event. So I want to talk about the foundations of Christianity in Ethiopia. And that would have to be coming from the fall of what we would call Kemet, or the ancient civilizations that predate even what we are calling Ethiopia, because before Ethiopia was Amexem, right?
Mhm.
Is that, am I pronouncing it right?
Aksum.
Aksum,
Yeah.
right? So during the fall of Aksum, there was already certain spiritual practices that we would consider to be traditional African spirituality. And
Well, it would actually have to be before Aksum, because there were still different forms of Christianity still existing in that period.
within in Aksum, the
Within
time of Aksum.
Yep, a lot of people don't know that, but yeah.
So then this brings me to my question. What do you know about the invasion of those regions like Ethiopia, so-called Egypt, Sudan, and those places? What would you know about the invasions of the Romans? Or even before the Romans was the Greeks, because if we're going to talk about the Kemetic civilization, we have to talk about its fall, and we have to talk about how it was actually overthrown and ruled by the general of Alexander, which is the Ptolemies, right?
Correct.
Ptolemy's reign. Now, I know because I grew up in Jamaica, and in Jamaica we have the Ethiopian Orthodox churches. My mother grew up in a time where she remembers when the Ethiopian Orthodox Church still had a very, very strong foothold in politics.
Mhm.
Meaning they came and they kind of spread the religion all over the country. And she always told me a story about this book, and it was a Bible. It was called the Book of Maccabees.
Mhm.
Now, in the Book of Maccabees, I actually purchased this book because I really wanted to see what she was talking about. Because for us, we were not allowed to read that Bible. We weren't allowed to read that book. We were only allowed to read the King James Version. Anything beyond or predating the King James Version, we were not allowed to read. So I purchased this book, and I started reading it. And it actually mentions real historical events. It talks about Alexander. It talks about Alexander's death, and then it talks Alexander the Great, or the Greek, for those who don't know what I'm talking about. And it talks about how when he fell, Ptolemy was the one who took over those regions, right? And Ptolemy was actually the one who was enforcing certain principles or practices and was changing the religion. And if you don't know, Ptolemy made himself a god. And he called this god
He made himself a scholar first.
Right.
And then
He
proceeded
called
to
himself
make himself a god,
Serapis.
Yeah.
And if none of you have ever seen Serapis, if you look at Serapis and you look at Jesus, it's the same person.
Mm.
Same exact thing. Now, when he made himself the god Serapis, it seems like the people of Ethiopia, or the people within those regions, were the first to kind of be open to it. Because in the Book of Maccabees, they quoted themselves that since the Greeks, and since they have come, and since they have taken over, we have faced suffering. Let us go and actually convert, or let us go and actually partake in their traditions, or let us actually adopt their ways. So for me, and everything that you're saying, it sounds like Samael is representing some form of authority, or maybe a political power.
Mm-hmm.
And then the political power was in opposition towards the ones in charge, or the God, because God is just a title which a man took upon himself, which that man being Ptolemy, right? So that's what it sounds like to me. So I want you to kind of like get into that. Like, how did this really come about? Because we can spend time talking about how they perceive it to be, but we know that there's a real history behind this thing, and that's what we really want the people to know about today.
I mean, the thing is, the history that you're giving is a history that's been completely eradicated in the country itself. Like, you're not going to be able to have any access of a history that will tell you any of that exposure. Because even the little bit of history that we have is really about certain kings at a certain period who, you know, were facing some form of a colonization from invading countries. It doesn't really state who were these invaders, but after the fall of a few of our kings, that's really when even the introduction of shoes came into the country, where they were even persecuting people to really like have to wear shoes. And that was like a big history at some point that I got exposed to, and I was like, that's very interesting. But outside of that, every other form of history that you're gonna find when you dig in terms of Christianity is stating that we had prophets, we had holy people that God himself exposed himself and gave certain things to. And even in the deeper forms of the initiation, what you're essentially learning are the experiences and the revelations of those particular people who are not stated in any of the books that you can find in any Christian doctrine that's around the world outside of Christian Orthodox, or maybe the Coptic Church itself.
So
growing up,
essentially,
all I'm saying is you don't have access. Everything that you can look into will only redirect you back into the religion itself. And it's done in a way where it has erased every form of history that can date back to any African origin, any African culture, and essentially views everything from the lens of the God itself and all of the descendants of that particular God.
God being the authority in which came to change things.
Exactly. Because before then, we were pagans. Before then, we were stone worshipers. There's that element.
Well, pagan being a derogatory term.
Correct.
Used against indigenous people from people who came in to pretty much colonize, right?
Because essentially, I mean, they do give it away in the book a little bit because you're talking about Abraham, because this is an Abrahamic culture, right? So whether it's Judaism, whether it's Islam or Christianity, these are all branching from that Abrahamic religion itself. Mm-hmm. And there's some even older texts that you can look into that even go as far back as Sanskrit and the Hindu religion, Brahmin and Saraswati and so on and so forth, which really hasn't done a good job of changing the names.
Which also is Greek influenced for a lot of people
Correct.
who don't know. Because Hinduism itself is not even the traditional religion, or I don't want to say religion, traditional spirituality of India. That was actually Greek influenced as well.
Mm-hmm. So essentially they talk about Abraham being the one who first converted and then became the favorite of God. And God made that covenant with Abraham because Abraham is one of the descendants of Adam himself. And the same promise that was given to Adam when Adam fell. But that's essentially why I was trying to go in a chronological order so that everybody can kind of get that connection. Because when God, kind of just taking a few steps back, when God finally decided to create human, the first human he created was Adam. But there's no mention of a counterpart until you go into the deeper parts of the initiation itself. Then they expose that to you. And then you find out other things.
So essentially what you're saying is Christians don't really know Christianity.
No, we don't.
No Christian really knows Christianity because they're not initiated
unless you're a
into it.
monk, unless you've been initiated into being a deacon and all of those ranks, you don't really know the religion as well as you think
hold
you
on,
do.
but it's important to distinguish between which denomination of the church, like you would be a monk or a deacon and such, because are you saying that all denominations?
No, I'm essentially saying Christian Orthodox.
Okay.
And maybe anything that stretches outside of that would be the Coptic Church, because there's a very close link and association with those two churches.
Interesting, Coptic, right?
Yep.
Because I've been mentioning Greeks a lot. Like, who exactly are the Copts, the Coptic people? That's why I mention the Greeks a lot, because the Coptic people are essentially just descendants of the Greeks,
Yes.
who kind of intermixed with the African people that were there at the time.
Arabic, African.
Arabic
Yep.
and African people, correct.
So essentially they reside in Egypt, and a lot of the Coptic church that we report to, and even the Coptic church reports back to us, is located in present-day Egypt now. So that's even something that I got exposed to by being around the monks and actually visiting monasteries. Monasteries are very different than churches.
How come?
Very different.
What makes them different?
The practice is different. The
But
customs are
But
different.
they're Christian. They're Christian monasteries.
Yes. It is strictly a Christian monastery.
So, what is it?
I mean, essentially, the whole there's a concept of leaving the world behind when you go into a monastery. So
How come?
essentially, people that are even seeking to go to monasteries are individuals who are renouncing the world, for
So,
lack of better words.
What is it? A temple or
It is
what
that's
is
the
it?
real temple.
When you say a monastery, what is that?
It's essentially like a real temple. That's where the monks reside. That's where people who renounce the world will reside and continue their search and their faith and their elevation in that particular religion, and ride up the ranks of all the different ranks that exist within that.
So you're saying they have aspects of the real history that haven't been removed, and then you're able to get access to the real aspects of history, you know, the real aspects that haven't been warped and adulterated to be, you know, taken from this fantastical perspective or fantastical aspect where it becomes like far out kind of legends and incomprehensible or unattainable religious stories that are just obviously missing foundational pieces of story and plot in order to understand.
Correct.
So you're saying that because we want to be able to give people a context, but then while giving them a context, we want to be able to help them orient themselves.
Correct.
Because you guys are giving a lot of historical context and a lot of historical facts, right? And a lot of, you know, different aspects of Christian history, world history that has been removed and a lot of people don't have access to, or a lot of people don't have exposure to, right? But then what it really boils down to is sort of like, why should anyone care?
Mm-hmm.
Why does it matter for anybody to know any of this stuff? Because, I mean, a lot of this is great, right? A lot of it is wonderful to hear. A lot of it is wonderful to know. But then the real question becomes, what's the use? Why is it useful to know any of this?
That's a good question. I mean, it's useful to know because everything that we do as humans, there has to be a goal. And for us as humans, our goal is to really understand where we're going, because we know at some point in time, we're going to die. That's a reality no one is going to be able to escape.
Mm-hmm.
To some degree, some of the Christian doctrines have accepted that and highlight that than other Christianities that I've seen, you know, let's say like coming to America, coming to other parts of the country and the world and so on and so forth. So when you're looking at that, everything now that you do becomes to fulfill that goal. But the steps that you're taking, it has to make sense. It has to align, and it has to be practical in the sense in which you're even putting it, which is like there has to be a utility to it, like a real practical utility to what you get back into what you're putting in. And what I was able to see through that religion is that I wasn't able to get back much. A lot of it was more so like that fantastical aspect of things where you just believe it and hope for better things to come. But you don't actually see a real practical reality where things are changing for the better. So for me, I would say that that's really the point. But if you don't know the history of where it comes from and what it's connected to, then you're essentially really blind because you have no way of really knowing if that is actually the origin of what it is you're tracing yourself back to.
I mean, I think it's important that people know this history because, as we were talking about before with the Native American people who were championing colonialism and really trying to, you know, have a fight or a voice to be expressing their religious freedom.
Yeah.
The thing is this. People have lost themselves. And as Zawaaz is talking about his experience growing up in Ethiopia and his experience growing up as a Christian, as a traditional Orthodox Christian, right? It seems like people have lost their sense of reality and their sense of self because the church and the religion itself has taken over the true spiritual or unseen aspect that holds to the cultural identity of the people. And it can only be so because it's coming from something that was outside. It's coming from something that came to kind of change people and came to control the people of that region, of that time. And the best way to do that is through spirituality because it's what's unseen. So if you have the unseen force and you are able to change the perception of the unseen force in the minds of people, you're able to control the people because now the people are going to adopt ways that are going to suit their ideas or their reality towards the unseen forces. So essentially, the reason why I'm bringing all this up is because I want people to have a context or an idea of where things were before, because we all have that same history. What I mean by that, we all have that same history is that we all have a history of being so-called pagan or being so-called traditional or having certain spirituality, and in that spirituality being the foundation of our values, our principles, the way we view things, the way we view life, the way we view our relationships, the way we view our families, all of these things, because what you even started off talking about was your family and how you interacted with your family and how your family interacted with other people and how the entire society is going to interact as a whole. So that's what I'm really trying to tackle here. It's like, at what point was that changed to the point where now people only see Christianity as the thing that is upholding their tradition and their values?
Because essentially, as it currently stands now, that non-material aspect of communication can only happen by a person. It's no longer even you that's actually doing something that's practical that can give you that connection. You have to essentially depend on another person where you're going and only receiving a better translation of the same book that you have in your hands. So it's not a real context that relates to your life. But if you don't have a way of really tracing things back to your origin, it becomes very difficult for you to know what you're trying to really connect to. It just becomes like an arbitrary sense of like, okay, I feel this way today, so how do I get what I want and not really what I need?
So here's the thing, right? Is the history of Christianity is important, right? Because the history of Christianity shows you that Christianity is a co-opted kemetic movement, which means that they stole Christianity from the kemetic movement, from kemetic spirituality. And then what they did was they removed certain aspects to ensure that you would then be able to identify with the aspects of kemetic spirituality in a way that it was palatable and easy for you to take it and easy for you to identify with the real aspects of kemetic spirituality, which is the original indigenous spiritual practice on this planet, the original human ingenious civilization that you can call, right? Mm-hmm. And it becomes important to know that because then the aspect in which Christianity tries to kick to you, which is a lot of confusion, which is a lot of bullshit, which is a lot of just like nonsense, which allows you to turn off certain parts of your brain and just kind of like accept it with this emotional aspect of like faith and this emotional aspect of, you know, belief, with these emotional aspects that just kind of remove the aspect of reality that you need in order to really understand what's really going on. And they do this because then it becomes very easy for them to then subject you to whatever they want to subject you to. So I didn't want to interrupt you guys. I wanted to let you guys talk. I wanted to let you guys really get out a lot of the history and a lot of the aspects, because it's very important for people, because a lot of this is removed from history. Like, this history exists, but they don't talk about this history in history books, in colonial history books. You're not going to be able to go get this history in, you know, the university. You're not going to be able to go get this history in AP high school. They're not going to expose this aspect of history to you, because then they have to own up to the fact that everything that this so-called modern civilization is standing on, or claims to have, or claims to be an authority on, or claims to be, you know, the origins of, or claims to be like, you know, powers on, or, you know, intelligent about, or smart about, all of that stuff, they have to cop to the fact that they don't know what they're talking about, and that they stole it from somebody else, and that it's a very cheap Chinese knockoff of something else.
Beijing. No, it's true, and it's important, again, to like reinforce the answer to the question that you asked earlier. It's important because we're talking about the foundations, right? And now Africa, or Merita as we call it traditionally, is the foundations of civilization. It's the foundations of spirituality. It's the foundations of all of our roots. Now, this is important to know and understand, and this is why I'm glad that we have Zawaaz on to like expose some of these things. It's important to know and understand, because if you can attack the foundations of civilization, if you can attack the roots of even humanity itself, or Adam, as we want to call it, right? If you can attack that, and you can change the perspective of the people that are there in the foundation of human psychosis or human civilization, then that sets the stage for you to be able to attack every single aspect of human identity. That sets the foundation for you to be able to then take it and then colonize the rest of the world with it, and then put it in a way that's, like you said, palatable for people. Because for you to be able to colonize people, you have to be able to give them something that resembles where they're coming from, to
what
a
they
degree.
originally had.
Right.
Yeah.
It resembles it,
Just
but
altered
it's
slightly.
altered. It's
Yeah.
altered, and it's altered in a way that suits your benefit, which is very, 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 very important for people to understand. Because a lot of us don't want to let go of these religions because we have this emotional attachment to it, which is
Well,
like,
you have pride.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
pride. It's pride in
Pride.
whatever you believe in. It's
Yeah.
it's all emotional, right? But we have to understand that at its core basis, these things have been put on us for a reason, and that reason has always been to control, to conform to something. Because even the aspect or the idea of God itself is just us giving control to something outside of ourselves, or us giving control to a force, in which is really just, if you want to be frank, if you want to break away the mystification of the words and all the different,
Demystify it.
you're gonna demystify it. It's just government. It's just politics. It's just people coming in, colonizing, and then making themselves the authority, giving themselves power, and that's all it is. That's what the so-called God is.
So essentially, now that you guys brought a clear perspective, it's important that we continue laying out the structure of the story, because it really does give that context and being able to see how it connects to what you're talking about. So after Adam was created and Adam was not satisfied, he needed a counterpart, then God took a piece of his rib to create essentially what you call Eve, a woman, a helper. Now that was something that for him fulfilled him. And the creation went on, and they lived in the Garden of Eden, so on and so forth. Now what's interesting is that there's an introduction of Satan, the counterpart, who the original wage that was made between the two was that if I can convince anyone or anything of your creation to come in my direction, they belong to me.
So it became a competition.
Became a competition.
Okay.
So essentially, now the snake comes in the garden. He conceals himself as a snake. Comes in the garden. There's 2 forbidden trees. But God said, you can partake in everything that you see that is in creation. But you cannot partake from these 2 trees. That tree was the tree of life and the tree of knowledge. So essentially, when the snake came, it came specifically to Eve. Because God had a covenant with Adam. Adam followed God. He loved God. He was following everything that God said. But he had a weakness in the whole story, who was Eve. He loved Eve. Eve was his counterpart. He trusted her, so on and so forth. So essentially, you see the story go where the snake now comes and convinces Eve that God does not want you to know what he knows. And that's why he told you not to partake in this tree, which is the tree of knowledge.
Well, the snake wasn't wrong.
Hold on.
I mean, if I'm colonizing somebody, I don't want them to know.
Exactly, but that's where it connects to everything you guys are saying. So essentially, he was able to seduce her into accepting that. So she ate from that apple and saw the things that she saw. She became all-knowing like God. Then decided to take that apple and give it to her husband. Because even traditionally, that's how things are done. The woman takes care of her husband, right? That's who is the nurturer. That's who takes care of building the husband and so on and so forth. So essentially...
That's a big gem you just dropped.
Yeah, essentially... But that's in the culture, you know what I mean? So essentially, because the culture is woven into that, automatically you accept these things as you're hearing it. It doesn't even become a form of a question. But once Adam took part in that apple, he was also able to see, and they both were able to see that they were naked, and they were conscious that they were naked. Essentially, then, the Spirit of God comes through the garden, calling for Adam. And then that's where Adam and Eve start hiding. And then God says, why are you hiding? And then Adam says, because I'm naked. I'm hiding from you.
And this is in the original text, right? This is the Ethiopian Orthodox text.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, hold on. All right, so okay.
Naked meaning that I see things the way that you do. So it's there's some metaphors to it.
I got you. I'm with you guys, but I have to...
Let me connect it. Just give me a moment.
Okay,
Let me connect
no problem.
it. So essentially...
And then I'm cutting both of you off.
After that, they are casted out because they broke the promise that they made with God to not consume from those 2 trees. Because
You're talking about Adam and Eve.
Adam and Eve.
And Lilith is just in the cut. Like, where's Lilith?
She's cut out of the whole story.
She's cut out.
You're initiated into deeper parts of this.
Yeah.
I want to get into
That's
the
important.
initiation.
Nah,
Hold on.
we're not going to get to the initiation of Christianity.
Because this is very important. So essentially, after
I'm going to be
that,
here all night.
if God allowed them to continue, they would go and partake in the tree of life, which then will give them the ability of eternal life. So because of that, he appointed some of the angels that he had to kick them out of the garden. And that's essentially how the story of humanity begins. Because now God said you will have to earn your way back. You will toil, you will live through the earth, you will suffer, all of this other stuff, and you will survive. And one day I will give you a promise that I will be born through your child to come and save you and redeem you. So essentially the story goes...
Sounds interesting. Sounds very familiar.
But that's what I'm saying. Now, essentially, the story goes where they continue living and so on and so forth. And at some point in time, one of those children becomes Abraham. Now, Abraham, before God chose to reveal himself to him, was a idol worshiper. Now, culturally, what we consider to be even idol worshiping is essentially ancestral worship.
Why you not dropping the bombs on that one?
Because essentially, this is really where all of the breakdown really begins. Because if you even trace it back to the original story itself, the fall of the angels, right, was actually the ancestors who are reincarnating back. So everything that we've been educated on through that religion is essentially to go against anything and everything that represents African culture, African spirituality. Because for you in your mind, in that sense, all that you can think of in going or straying away from that religion will be you actually worshiping idols.
Okay.
So
You
really
worshiping
taking away from
fallen
yourself.
gods.
Okay.
Correct.
All right. So now I appreciate the historical context. I appreciate the historical context. Now let me now bring it back to reality and insert some concrete logic and now like get you out of all of that esoteric wonderful guck, right? So this is all just there to tell you this, right? And to get you here is when we get into the kemetic creation story, right? After the existence as we know it was created, there were two gods that were given an option as to how they wanted to live out their eternity, okay? And their choices affected all of the existence, all right? And one of their options, or one of the two options that were presented to them was the cyclical nature, and the other one was a linear nature, okay? So these two gods is what you could maybe understand within the religious context as God and Satan, okay? That would be the best way to maybe for people to understand it, okay? So between these two gods, one of them chose the cyclical nature and one of them chose the linear nature, okay? Now, these two gods had, based on their decision on the choice that they chose, one of them choosing cyclical, one of them choosing linear, it meant that their two energies would constantly be in opposition for eternity. And that would ensure that the existence as we know it would continue to go forward. Now, this is basically what these two gentlemen are giving everybody a context about, is that this is all just a really bad knockoff, a very wonderful, intricate, extensive Chinese designer handbag of the real designer handbag. So, you know, these are stories that we keep within the initiatic context. I'm not going to go into them tonight because we'll be here all night. We'll be here, you know, forever.
We should do a 6-hour episode one day.
No, we're not going to do a 6-hour episode.
We would cover so much.
Yeah, we would
Context
cover
is
so much.
important.
But context is important.
It's very important.
This was a very important episode. And this was a very important episode for us to have. And now we can direct you to some of those resources that are available online that you can get right now that you can check out. We have a Vimeo page. If you go to our Vimeo page, you can find our Vimeo page. We have it on you can find it through our website. You can find it through therisingfirefly.org. You can hear the actual kemetic cosmogony as told by Nebnabla Musamoto Dinabig, the original founder of the Earth Center, and you can listen to the Holy Drama, which is the second part of the kemetic cosmogony, the kemetic creation story of the universe as we know it. And you can get into all of the real that cuts through all of the nonsense that we're touching on right now, because we'll be here all night. We got to cap it at some point. We got to, find a stopping point at some point. And I know Kagzrimen and Zawaaz are very much like history buffs. Not only are they history buffs, but they very much have a bone to pick with the Christian church.
It's personal. It's very personal.
It's personal. It's personal for them. And it's personal for a lot of us because we're all really subjected to the horrors of colonization done in the name of gods, and all of the indigenous societies that have suffered at the hand of people doing it in the name of gods, in the name of these colonial gods and colonization, in terms of, helping people and enlightening people in the name of God in order for them to find heaven and to release them from their heathen ways and, you know, their devilish ways and all of that wonderful, you know, barbaric perspectives that they stand on. So it's important. It's very important. But you can check out some of those resources that we have online to really get the context. And also when you join our initiation, if you so choose to join our initiation, you can learn a lot more about that. And then you can get a lot more context that we offer that wouldn't be done here only by Kagzrimen and Zawaaz. We have many different locations. We have, like I said, we have one in Baltimore, one in Chicago, one in Houston. We're working to bring you one in the West Coast right now, and we also have one in we have two in Canada. We have one in Montreal, we have one in Toronto, we have one in London, we have one in Coventry. We have many temples that we are aligned with in Kebtah, and you know, check us out. There's a lot. Please check out Kebtah Kebtah-nj.org. Check out our landing page. We have merch. For those of you that haven't put in your orders yet, make sure you put in your orders before we open it up to the public, because then we can't, you know, guarantee that you'll be able to get one once we open it up to the public. So please check us out. We have many different resources. This has been another episode of the Gated Gates podcast. We have a lot of different events going on right now in California. Check us out, Dogon Wisdom. We have so many events going on in Northern California. We have events coming to you in Southern California. We have events coming to you in Colorado. We have events coming to you in Texas. We have so many different collaborations and different events coming out. So please check us out. Like I said, dogonwisdom.com or and Kebtah-nj.org. So many different areas, so many different places where you can check out the work. The earthcenter.org, risingfirefly.org. We have our sister organization, Costa Natural Healing. Check us out. Thank you for tuning in. This has been another episode of the Gated Gates podcast, and we will see you next week.